separate from the Yorktown and attempt to climb on into orbit. If the flight worked, then 1 week later the Enterprise and the Hornet would attempt a confirmation flight, and if that in turn worked, the solar power stations could become a reality. It was 7:13 a.m. Doug Pierce's team of flight controllers worked through the itemized countdown checkouts in the flight plan. At the Dryden Flight Research Center, Edwards Air Force Base, their counterparts conducted the physical preparations for the mission. If Mission Control Houston was the administrative center of all operations, Dryden was the on-site operations field post for the flight, making certain all was ready for the Columbia and the Yorktown. By 7:15 a.m. Houston time, the astronaut crew of the Columbia had finished breakfast, had received a final briefing, and had begun to don their bulky white spacesuits in the suit room. The commander of the Columbia, 43-year-old U.S. Air Force Colonel Christopher Rusty Bishop III, leapt from the table and swung his arms vigorously, testing the $250,000 suit's mobility. "Well, I wouldn't play golf in it, but I guess she'll do." He grinned, and he glanced over to his colleague, the pilot and second in command of the Columbia, Lieutenant Colonel Dick Merriman. "Well, Dick, old man, it won't be long now." Dick Merriman, a quiet-spoken Oklahoman with a flat, scarred face and a nose obviously broken more than once, raised his eyebrows, snapped his gloves onto the wrists of his suit, and nodded pensively. Down the hall from the suit room, the twin windowless light blue crash doors were punched open by burly flight attendants in one-piece orange NASA jumpsuits. A small crowd of perhaps 40 Air Force servicemen, Dryden Flight Research Center technicians, NASA and Edwards Air Force Base personnel formed a spontaneous receiving line to the transporter van, waiting to drive them to the Columbia. The van rolled sedately past mate-demate device number 1, the open-air girded garage housing the ships for the next flight, the Hornet and Enterprise. The van gently bumped to a halt and stopped at the base of mate-demate device number 2, a scant 200 yards from the Enterprise and Hornet. Dozens of workers in hard hats and white NASA jackets scurried about. As first Bishop, then Merriman stepped from the van with practiced care, work came to a halt, and the workers cheered and clapped and waved. Bishop and Merriman strode purposefully to the base of the mate-demate device, where a steel-grated elevator waited to carry them up to the entrance hatch. The Columbia's main hatch, 4 feet across, opened down and away from the ship like a round diving board, and even in ordinary clothes it took considerable dexterity to enter the ship without giving one's head a nasty crack. They stood in the Columbia's lower deck living quarters, which were complete with food galley and storage space, sleeping bags, and zero-gravity toilet, and then with some care climbed the 6-rung chromium ladder to the flight deck. Bishop, the commander, took the left-hand seat, and Merriman, the pilot, the right. Disconnecting the portable air-conditioning units, they plugged into the ship's life support system. "Home again," said Merriman with satisfaction. "Home," replied Bishop, cinching his belt and chest harness into place. At 8 a.m., T-2 hours, the flight controllers continued to report to Doug Pierce, and the flight director listened with care, scrutinizing his display screen for the slightest discrepancy which might endanger the launch. Doug Pierce ran his eyes down the chronologically tabulated flight plan, stopping at 8:15:30, Navy Lieutenant Commander Jack Lewis, Jr., and U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robert D. Clark. They should be leaving their suit room, he thought. The van would take them to the orange mate-demate device number 2 garage housing their ship, the mission's mothership, the Yorktown. Lewis and Clark were essentially the forgotten men of the mission, as their role in the flight, although critical, was brief. A short 20-minute climb to the Columbia separation point at 70 miles altitude, and then a quick return flight to Houston's own Ellington Air Force Base next door to the Space Center. 42-year-old Robert D. Clark, Yorktown's quiet-spoken, articulate pilot, was an amateur writer-historian as well as aerospace engineer. The ruggedly handsome astronaut was approaching the close of an 11-year career with NASA. Most of his adult life had been tied up with the agency. By all accounts, Lieutenant Commander Jack Lewis, Jr., the 39, was a pain in the ass. You wouldn't invite him to a party or out for a drink. You sure as hell wouldn't want your sister dating him. But if you had to place your life in one pilot's hands,